It began with a single shot, not from a soldier, not from a revolutionary, but from a man who was never supposed to be a hero, a man whose name you've probably never heard. This is the story of an impossible rebellion, a movement that wasn't led by generals or politicians, but by ordinary people, teachers, dock workers, poets, who decided they'd had enough. By the 1970s, Ireland was a tinderbox. Decades of oppression, of being treated like second-class citizens in their own land, had pushed people to the edge. But the British government wasn't worried. They'd crushed rebellions before. What could a handful of desperate men and women do against an empire? Meet Sion McBride, a lawyer, a former IRA man who turned his back on violence, a man who believed change could come another way. But history had other plans, because in 1976, something happened that no one expected. A protest that started with just 7 men would explode into a firestorm that changed Ireland forever. This is how freedom is won. They called it the Blanket Protest. A silent rebellion, no guns, no bombs, just 7 men and a choice that would break them before it made them free. This was the British government's worst nightmare. Not an army, but men who refused to wear a prison uniform, who chose instead to shiver naked on concrete floors, wrapped only in their own defiance. Because this wasn't just about prison rules, it was about identity. To wear the uniform meant admitting you were a criminal. And these men? They were prisoners of war. Or at least, that's what they believed. But then, the world started watching, and the British government made their first mistake. They thought humiliation would break these men. Instead, it lit a fuse. The beatings came next, guards dragging men from their cells, scrubbing them raw with wire brushes. But the louder the violence grew, the quieter the protesters became. No screams, just silence. And silence? Silence is dangerous. Then, they stopped washing, stopped emptying their chamber pots, let the filth rise ankle-deep in their cells. A stench so thick, guards vomited in the hallways, because now the whispers were spreading. To Dublin, to New York, to politicians who'd ignored Ireland for years. And somewhere in the darkness, a new plan was forming, one that would turn these 7 men into martyrs. But martyrs have to die first. His name was Bobby Sands, poet, fighter, 27 years old, and on March 1st, 1981, he ate his last meal. Not a strike, not a protest, a fast, the oldest weapon of the desperate. Because when words fail, when the world looks away, there is only one thing left to offer. Your body, your breath, your very pulse. The British government swore he'd break. Margaret Thatcher went on television. Crime is crime is crime. As if this was about theft and not sovereignty. As if a man starving himself to death was a common criminal. They didn't understand. This wasn't negotiation. It was sacrifice. And Sands knew something Thatcher didn't. He wasn't just refusing food. He was turning his own dying into a broadcast. Every gasp, every failed organ, a live autopsy of empire. By day 40, the world was screaming. Newspapers from Paris to Moscow demanded action. The IRA's recruitment tripled overnight. And, still, Thatcher refused to blink. On the 66th day, Bobby Sands' heart stopped. The prison doctor wrote starvation on the death certificate. But the people, they wrote murder. 10 men would starve themselves to death that year. But the first is always the one history remembers. And now, the war had its saint, Belfast. Thousands of feet marching in eerie silence. A single coffin draped in the Irish tricolor stretching for miles. Then, a sudden close-up of a teenage boy pressing Sands' smuggled poem against his chest like a sacred text the British had miscalculated. They thought letting Sands die would end the protest. Instead, they handed Ireland a martyr. And martyrs? Martyrs don't rest. They ignite. Overnight, the world turned. The EEC condemned Britain. The UN demanded investigations. Even America, started questioning its closest ally, and in the shadows, the IRA's arsenal grew heavier with every coffin. Thatcher still refused to bend, but her own cabinet was panicking, because now came the second hunger striker, then the third, and with each death, something unexpected happened. From his prison cell, from his deathbed, Bobby Sands had been elected to British Parliament. A dead man now held more legitimacy than the government trying to erase him. The Iron Lady had met the unbreakable, and for the first time, she flinched. October 3rd, 1981, the hunger strikes ended. But the war? The war had just changed shape, because sometimes, losing the battle is how you win the war. They never announced their defeat. No speeches, no treaties, just a quiet phone call from London to Dublin. 2 words. Enough talk, because here's the truth. Thatcher couldn't say aloud. Bobby Sands didn't beat her. Neither did the IRA. It was accountants? Turns out, empires run on money. And by 1983, Northern Ireland was bleeding Britain dry. Bomb scares emptied tourist hotels. American investors fled. Even the Queen's banks were begging. Make it stop. So, behind closed doors, they folded. Prison uniforms abolished. Political status granted. The same demands the hunger strikers died for, now stamped, approved, by men in suits who'd never say their names. No one called it freedom, not yet, but the iron door had creaked open, and Ireland remembered. That's how rebellions really win. Not with the last bullet, but with the last bill paid. Not with the loudest scream, but with the quietest reckoning. So when they tell you one man can't change history, show them Bobby Sands. Show them how a starving poet in a dark cell outlasted an empire. If you've watched this far, you get it. History isn't just dates and dead kings. It's the untold fights that shape us. So, hit subscribe button